Hi. Hi, welcome everyone. I'm Ryan Pierce. I'm the chair of the Low Residency MFA in Visual Studies here at PNCA. I want to start by acknowledging that the land where PNCA is located rests on the traditional village sites of the Multnomah, Cathlamet, Clackamas, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Malala, bands of the Chinook, and many other tribes who made their homes along the Columbia River. We also acknowledge the systemic policies of genocide, relocation, and assimilation that still impact many Indigenous Native American families today. As settlers and guests on these lands, we respect the work of Native nations, leaders, and families, and make ongoing efforts to center Indigenous knowledge, creativity, resilience, and resistance. I invite you all to spend some time with the Arrowhead Project, which is a long-term installation of works by Indigenous artists addressing the history of this institution and the place it occupies. And you'll find that throughout the atrium of the 511 building here. This summer, Low Res will host artist talks each Wednesday at 6 p.m. here at the Mediatek for the next 7 weeks, except for the week of July 4th. And then we have an added event on Tuesday, June 23rd, which is a conversation between Indigenous scholar, poet, novelist, and musician Leanne Batasamasake Simpson and local luminary Walida Emerisha. This event is co-organized with our sister program, the Low Residency Creative Writing MFA. As well, tomorrow evening at 5 p.m., this same space will host curator Courtney Lane Snell as part of the Ford Family Foundation's Creative Conversations series. It's a busy week. Tonight, we kick off our summer series with Salty Xi Jie Ng, whose practice spans performance, video, formally experimental writing, and all manner of socially engaged work. Like most of the art that sticks with me long after the direct experience, Salty's work seems to tilt the world a little bit or shake it gently, moving the unseen or unacknowledged to the surface. And what Salty's work surfaces for me makes my world feel more expansive. The interplay of myth with memoir, centering the lives and stories of our elders who are so often overlooked, and illuminating moments of quirky beauty and power in a way that makes me know those moments are always at hand or underfoot. If only I could slow down, look closer, and listen more deeply. Salty's work also has a Bjorkian sense of mischief, a gentle raised eyebrow at my wondering if we're playing or being gravely serious, and the answer seems to be yes, we are. Salty is based in Singapore and Portland and is the 2024 recipient of the Chamberlain Award for Social Practice Artists from the Headlands Centre for the Arts, and the 2025 Arts Research Scholar in Residence at the Nanyang Academy of Fine Art, University of the Arts, Singapore. She's been artist in residence at spaces such as the Singapore Art Museum, Taipei Artist Village in Taiwan, UMass Dartmouth's College of Visual and Performing Arts, and received support and partnerships with many other institutions around the globe. She has an MFA in Art and Social Practice from Portland State University. Please join me in welcoming Salty Xi Jie Ng.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Ryan. It really means a lot to be able to share my work tonight and with my Portland community, and thank you so much for being here. It's the first time that I've been able to share my work in Portland since I graduated from PSU in 2019 and since I kind of partly moved back. So I'm really, really excited to spend the next hour talking about my work with you all. And we'll have some time for Q&A as well. So so this program, okay, actually I'm already annoyed by the stand, so I'm gonna just use this thing. So this program is called Visiting Artists, so I thought I would share a bit about where I'm visiting from, which is Singapore, an island, also a city and a country that is about twice the size of Portland, but has 6 million people on it. Very technologically advanced place. Also a place where uncles play chess and aunties run medicine halls. A very multicultural place with a high level of food obsession and one of the most stressful education systems in the world. Also a place with the death penalty for drugs. And they just legalized gay sex 3 years ago. So that's a bit of context about where I'm from and where my heart still is and where I'm partly based. So at artist talks, I tend to share a lot of work, which is what I'm going to do today as well. And this is kind of the flow, the sort of organizing it into this flow for today. And a big part of my work is in socially engaged art, but I also practice in performance, video, installation, writing, or wherever the inspiration takes me. And I see my work as a way to live and be with others. How can we be ourselves together? I work to create conditions for people to be themselves. I am changed by them. They are changed by the experiences that we share together. So the first project I want to share is something I made right out of graduation at PSU from the MFA in Art and Social Practice. So me and my collaborators from the program had been going to Columbia River Correctional Institution for a couple of years doing an art program there once a week. We created an art library, we had artist talks, workshops, and so on, and then some of us would lead our own projects. So this project was called The Inside Show, and a question that one could ask of this project is, how can people be themselves in dehumanizing conditions where having fun is a radical act? So as a result of that relationship building over several years, it went from like getting permission to bring a book, to getting permission to bring pencils and paper, to getting permission to take pictures, to bringing cameras in for the inmates to take their pictures, pictures of each other, to bringing video cameras in, to then like having them have consent forms where they could agree to have their images outside, and so on. So it's like it just kept building with that the relationship with the administration. We were lucky to have someone in there who was really pushing for our program to keep going to the next level. So I did a project with a group of inmates called The Inside Show, and we thought of it as the world's first prison variety show. It was a platform where they could insert themselves in ways that they wanted to, whether it's like as a script writer, a performer, a lights person, a camera person, a props maker, so on and so forth. So people could come out with their own ideas for a variety show. It actually came out of from knowing that there is a prison tradition of making people making their own meals on their unit microwaves because the food that they get served is so inhuman. And there's actually like prison cookbooks for making microwave meals. So we had a cooking segment called Microwave Magic, where people could share their recipes. And we basically filmed in a few classrooms. People made skits making fun of prison life. And let me just show this 1-minute trailer.
My name is James Hanley. I'm the Correctional Rehabilitation Manager of Columbia River Correctional Institution. How you like them apples? The variety show.
The Inside Show, the Inside Show, the Inside Show, latest fashion, cooking and singing, comedy sketches, microwave magic. On the Inside Show, the Inside Show, the Inside Show, conceptual art, sports and barbers, sharing our passion on the Inside Show, the Inside Show, the Inside Show. If you wanna know what's happening inside Waji, Inside Show, the Inside Show.
was also original music and poetry and also dialogue sessions. And parts of this can be found on YouTube. What was really interesting about this was that it was a living negotiation with the prison admin, the criminal justice system, essentially, because we would send in the edits and then it would be like a dialogue of like, oh, what can you include? What do you have to tweak in this process? And then this next project, I was the artist in residence at UMass Dartmouth in Massachusetts, and I had the freedom of having a year to just create projects with people who work there or study there. And I was really interested in working with the maintenance and security staff because they are like the outsiders to the art world, but their everyday lives include supporting the art world. It's like the security who's outside every day, he never gets into a conversation about the art in the gallery. Who asks him if he likes it or if he thinks it's cool, right? So Jim is the person that started it all, and that is his quote. How it happened was that I was given a tour of this building, which is an amazing historic building called the Star Store, which sadly it's now defunct, in downtown New Bedford. And I saw this exhibition, Suspended Sentence by Bill Seaman, and I thought, oh yeah, poetic. But then I asked Jim, who's, his reception table was at the entrance, and he had to look at this every day. I was like, oh, what do you think of this? And he was like, I don't know, Salty. I don't really understand it or think it's art or something like that. And then I was like, oh wait, your words should be there instead. So I got permission from the administration to replace the words of Bill Seaman's exhibition when it had ended with the words of the security and maintenance staff in the same font and the same position, so as to create this effect of people like doing a double take when they walk around the space. And we also added lots of new spots. So this is also at the entrance. Also made him a mobile sign because he felt that way about that artwork. So he could go around to any artwork and just express that. And this is in the elevator. It also helped to reveal some of the working conditions of the cleaning staff, like Nathan. And this is Mark, another security person. This is also at the entrance. And then at the opening night, these men all got to contribute if they wished, like to some kind of booth or like have a contribution to that night. And Wayne, who had been a cleaning staff there for many years, over a decade, made these Polish guamkis. Jim loves talking to people, so he had a conversation booth. And the final year painting and drawing students did portraits of him, which he then went into, I think it was Target, and had them all framed. And Peter, who was a man of many talents, taught a runes writing workshop. Yeah. And then at the same time, I was also really curious as a kind of a trickster type person as to how tenured art academic staff feel about their working conditions and their chosen profession. So I got permission to sit in on the tenured art faculty's meetings and take verbatim quotes of the things they were saying, and I made them into poems. So it was called Faculty Relations, a compassionate trickster exploration of the social space shared by minted members of the academic institution of art. And then I made them into these poems and put them in people's cubby holes or at the dean's office. And then we had... I actually had to go back to Singapore because of COVID, and I went back 1.5 years later, and then we had an event and made a zine with thoughts from some of the staff and the poems, and we had a reading. I say fuck all the time, and I don't want the administration knowing. Actually, I only say it twice a semester. And then I also got them to do this exquisite corpse poem exercise over email during COVID, some of the staff. And some more excerpts here. I'm just saying this document is beautiful. It just doesn't match reality. We just keep fighting for it. I don't know what to do. Well, I've done all three and it eats you up. I don't know if our intention is to look at the whole human matches the rhetoric of institutions these days. This document does assiduously avoid numbers. For those of you who don't know, I didn't get tenure. I did not get tenure. The first time I applied, I'm sorry that happened to you, and I was right there with you. It was the worst year of my life. We don't want to be judging ourselves this way. It feels terrible. So, where do we go from here? And I mean, when is this great artwork that is supposed to be showing at MoMA going to be made? Spring break. Yeah. Okay, and then during COVID, I had the opportunity to be artist in residence at a neighborhood mall in Singapore through the National Arts Council, like a residency program. And I was given an empty retail unit. This is what it eventually became, Buangkok Mall Life Club. But I was given an utterly empty retail unit, and I knew nobody. I was just wondering how to get started. So I went to Uniqlo and bought 2 of these dresses so that I could have kind of a uniform and wear it every time I went there. And then I created 4 different entry points into the space. I'll just go into 3 of them right now. I wanted to humanize the relationships that people have with those working at the malls, in the mall, because people usually just go in the mall, buy your thing, pay, and leave. But do we really know who works in the mall? So I created this thing called the Buangkok Square Mall Worker Catalog, where myself and people in my team, we went around interviewing people who work in the mall about their thoughts on the mall and what do they do outside of work. And from the maintenance people who run the hardware store, temperature screener. At that time, we had temperature screening. And then we made a wall of this, and people could take the clipboards and go out and interview more people. And then there was also this heartbreak altar where people could leave residues from past relationships. And then we did a letting go ritual for them at the end of it. But the one that really exploded and went crazy was this exchange department, where we were looking at how neighbors can engage in an alternative economy as a creative, community-centered antidote to consumerism. So the idea is that it's the only shop where money is not needed in this mall, and you can bring items in for exchange. Like if you bring 5 things, you get 5 points, and then you can redeem the points that day or another day. And 1 point corresponds to 1 thing. So people started going crazy for this, and it was a really wonderful. Also because I put sofas and all, people would just come and sit and hang out. Singaporeans' main pastimes are shopping and eating, and there's a ton of malls. So this girl on the left contributed her first abstract painting. This teenager on the right came in with a book and left with a phone. We had all sorts of objects, from bras that were 20 years old, used to seduce someone's husband, to face oil blotters, and kids' potties, and lots of things. And we tried to organize and reorganize. And we had these regular customers. Aunties were folding plastic bags together. That's something that they love doing. And we had window display, like live window displays, and that's one of the customers who contributed about 100 of her pins from her clubbing days. And lots of stories, trying to keep track of the points, trying to make a map of the exchanges. How do we ascribe value to things? What do the objects we let go and take in reflect about self, the collective, and material culture? We also did surveys. It was pretty extensive. And then we gave up on the points and we made everything free. And we just wanted to get rid of everything because we were like, oh no, now we have too much. People were in line trying to get in. And then I made these certificates to appreciate our legendary and beloved customers, the people who came regularly and just hung out in our space. And then we closed public access and just had our legendary and beloved customers with us, and we made found object sculptures with all the residues. And Some of them wanted to work with receipts to make these snowflake things, and then had a little exhibition to commemorate the time in the space. And it was really sad that we couldn't continue, actually. And that's a whole other topic, which is like when partnerships are made in socially engaged projects, and how do they get continued, or like how are these stakeholder relationships nurtured, or how do they fail to be nurtured by the kind of initiating institution? Yeah. Okay, so now I get into a few projects which is about social practice, art, and institutions. So I had the opportunity to be an artist in residence at Singapore Art Museum, and I wanted to use the privilege of my access to investigate their acquisition process and how they don't collect social forms of art, and think about how social forms of art can be collected. So I ended up creating this, this project was called Dear Singapore Art Museum Acquisition Committee, and I ended up creating this fake institution with my collaborator Shah on the right, who was also an artist in residence for her own project at the time, and that's Zarina in the polka dotted dress. She is an artist friend, and eventually I did a performance lecture presenting my research, and we invited the museum to collect Zarina's work. And she walked down a red carpet. In the end, of course, they didn't collect it. And the presentation also tried to demystify the acquisition process through and showing this diagram that is a summary of the research I did with various parties, directors, curators, the Heritage Conservation Centre, and I also made a document called Recommended Methods for Collecting Social Forms of Art. It's on my website. And also this is like my high-class curator persona, trying to say something about curators there. And then this project was followed, also the whole lecture is online if you ever want to check it out. There was also this part where I made a fake private collection of relics from social practice art projects from Singapore's art history. And there were these vouchers people could get to get access to a portfolio review with the most powerful man in the Singapore art world. Whoops, yeah, okay. And then that project was followed up with this smaller one with Museum Y, which is a Nordic museum network rethinking museums for the future. They were interested in what I was doing to provoke on this subject, and they invited me to facilitate remotely a conversation among Nordic museum directors, curators, and some artists on the very same subject of the acquisition of social forms of art. So I employed the same method that I used with the tenured faculty, and in that hour of their conversation, which was at times emotional, I took down what they said verbatim and then made it on the spot into a long poem, which is a document that also lives on my website. And they said things like, it doesn't have to be our wet dream to end up in a museum. And now where I'm at with this is I am writing a research paper on the state of social practice art in Singapore in the capacity of this arts research scholar in residence at the University of the Arts, Singapore, which is a position where it is really hard to be a trickster because it's a really traditional undertaking. It's like an academic study that has to go through formal approvals and things like that, and has like proper research methodology. But yeah, these are some of the things that we are looking at through the study. The gaps and opportunities in the field in Singapore and pedagogy and so on. And so these are the things that are swimming around my mind, like funding, censorship in Singapore. People have talked about sustained mentorship as being a very important thing that they want in the field, in a field that requires a lot of risk-taking and observing established, more experienced practitioners, and so on and so forth. So now I go into a section that is about the inner worlds of older women. I've worked a lot with seniors, and in 2016, I started this collaborative publication project called The Grandma Reporter. It's on senior women's culture around the world. And the first issue was on style and aging, and I made it in collaboration with the Hollywood Senior Centre, now known as the Community for Positive Aging. And then after that, the second issue went a bit deeper. It was about intimacy. And it was about the relationship between intimacy, aging, and being a woman. And this is a quote from Audre Lorde that guided this project and guides my work and a later project and my life. So we would meet regularly and explore the subject, and then the seniors split off into sub-projects to explore according to their interests. So I led the project and also brought in other artists to come work with the seniors, one of whom is in the room. And we ended up making a 40-page publication that was distributed at senior centers around the region. And the hope is that it's something that you can pick up at a senior center or a waiting room, that an older woman can, and that would feel really relevant to them and their concerns in life. So we were looking at it from, and this is the bunch of us, or most of us at the launch. We were looking at intimacy from a really expanded perspective, intimacy with yourself, with nature, with friends, family, and then of course also physical intimacy, which includes sex, but it's not limited to sex. So we had scores for intimacy. This is by Erica Dadini, who is also here tonight. And then we had a touch section. And then this was fantasy portraits. Sharon wanted to be on the cover of her own romance novel. She also wrote an article about romance novels. Betty came out in her late 70s and met the love of her life and got married. This was a dating ad. This was a sort of self-created ad on hugs. And then there was the Senior Women's Erotica Club, where we got together to discuss erotic matters and read senior erotica. And Jackie Jackson, came up with a slow sex playlist. And these were some of the prompts. Did a survey. Do you wish you had more male companionship? No. And then we had a launch and women-only discussion on intimacy. And I was shocked because they were packing the room. Like you couldn't even close the door. When at the start, people didn't want to join because they thought it was a dirty subject. And then this led to a Singaporean version commissioned by Theatre Works for their Festival of Women Now. And this involved working with 15 Singaporean older women. And the publication was kind of a bonus component. It was primarily 9 short films and 5 live performances on Zoom because of COVID at the time. So we went through an exploration process. It was interesting to see how their concerns were both similar and different. And yeah, we had a really wide range of topics. Like Faiza was talking about her relationship with the indigenous people in the forest in Malaysia. Pushpa talked about her relationship with God. Dana wrote an erotic story. Lian Hyok is a 74-year-old ballerina. Zubi talked about dating at an old age and pulled tarot cards for her audiences. And Patricia loves cosplay and not aging. Yeah. And then that led to a 1-year project about the end of life. So this project was produced by Arts Walk, and they have a project called, Both Sides Now. You can see in the top right corner. Both Sides Now is a arts-based community project where artists go to different neighborhoods in Singapore, and every 2 years or so, they work in a new neighborhood, and they work with seniors to talk about the end of life, and it ends up in exhibitions and dialogue. So I worked with a senior center in North Singapore, and this edition was in close partnership with Yishun Health, which is like a government health board, but they were surprisingly quite radical and wanted to create spaces where seniors would lead their community. So the senior center was very special and very close-knit and very vibrant. So yeah, we had an exploration process over a few months. It was really a privilege to have the time to do this, although I think it is basic for such projects. And we did things like talk about end-of-life priorities. People were invited to write their eulogies, bring objects that they wanted to leave behind, make a map of their lives, role play, end-of-life conversations that were hard to have with the people around them. A key part of this was trying to have end-of-life conversations. And what is that like? And what are the scenarios in which that might happen? Like an older person with their child. Maybe it's the adult child who doesn't want to talk about it, or it's the older person who doesn't want to talk about it, or this older person has a good friend in a hospital who's single, and this person doesn't want to prepare anything, and so on and so forth. There's like many, many scenarios, and I quickly discovered that role-playing is a really empowering way for people to emerge scenarios that they care about and want to process and figure out together in a group setting. So that led to an exhibition with many different components and programs and 8 different art projects, including a 76-year-old cosmic philosopher's existential questions on life. We co-created this costume with her, and then she had this booth in a public space where she could talk to people about her questions. Also, the projects were conceptualized with the seniors after this period of exploration and me getting to know each of them quite deeply on a one-on-one basis, so that the projects were all really unique and expressed an essence of who they were and what their concerns were regarding this end-of-life subject. So this was a collaborative film made at the swimming pool next to the senior center, because 3 of the women in the Mandarin group of the project learned to swim at an old age. One of them learned when she was 79. So we asked them to share their thoughts and then wrote the script together and then made this film. It's really fun. And this one by Magdalene, she is 70 and her mother is in her 90s, and she's the primary caregiver of her mother with dementia. So I invited her to write a letter to other caregivers, and then we juxtaposed that with pictures that I took of her everyday life with her mother in collaboration with staff from Yishun Health. So it was really interesting because these staff members who are like community health workers but had like latent or side interests in art and creative pursuits started joining our projects, and it really created a wholesome community where those people are not just, they are seen beyond the kind of roles that they've been playing in the community. And Devi did a project about her recipes that she's leaving behind and how she loves to cook for her family. And then Agnes, we made these sculptures of the umbilical cords of her daughters that she wants to give them when she passes on. And we had end-of-life conversations and role plays and small conversations at tables. Magdalene, we also had like specific topics like conversations on caregiving and so on. So now I will talk about some projects on eroticism and butoh before I get to the final section. I started a collective of female artists who are interested in exploring what the erotic mean. So we came up with a series of scores, and it ended up as about a 4.5-hour durational gathering where femmes and non-binary people could come and experience this series of scores on the erotic, and the erotic beyond the sexual. We were very much guided by Audre Lorde's writing and thinking around the erotic. And it was really wonderful and nourishing, and we are hoping to continue the work in some way. And I have been studying butoh as well, which is a Japanese performance movement form. And this was a performance I did at the end of last year with a phallus. And the premise is that an older woman on her deathbed encounters a shimmering phallus. So it was really interesting to bring in like the worlds of the elderly and erotic into this embodied performance, and in a way like expanding the ways in which I work with these subjects. And this is a recent performance, just a couple of months ago, with my friend Crystal at the Portland Butoh Fest. We also acted as crones in this butoh performance. And then this has been a really recent discovery for me. So I was at a residency at the Headlands Centre for the Arts last summer, and I went in on the social practice category, but I received the gift of discovering erotic painting, and I'm not trained in painting, so I come to it from a very innocent and outsider perspective, like I have nothing to lose, I don't really know anything. My partner occasionally gives me some ideas on like color mixing or things like that, and so I get to choose like what do I want to know and what do I not want to find out about, and I'm just trying to have fun, and it's brought me so much joy. So yeah, okay, so now I come to the last segment of my work about ancestry and transformational grief. I originally wanted to read this whole poem, but I don't think there's that much time. So I'll just read a small excerpt of this poem by Joy Harjo, who was the first Native Poet Laureate of the US. Okay. This poem is called A Map to the Next World. An imperfect map will have to do, little one. The place of entry is the sea of your mother's blood, your father's small death as he longs to know himself in another. There is no exit. The map can be interpreted through the wall of the intestine, a spiral on the road of knowledge. You will travel through the membrane of death, smell cooking from the encampment where our relatives make a feast of fresh deer meat and corn soup in the Milky Way. They have never left us. We abandoned them for science. And when you take your next breath as we enter the fifth world, there will be no X, no guidebook with words you can carry. You will have to navigate by your mother's voice, renew the song she is singing. Fresh courage glimmers from planets. So, the question that I hold for this last segment is, how do I carry on after my paternal grandma's death? I was really close to my paternal grandmother, and when she died in 2020, I was, on the third day of her funeral, I was invited to be an artist in residence at the Singapore Art Museum, and I decided to spend my time creatively exploring my grief. And so I ended up starting this thing called Pai Pai Research Group. Pai Pai means to pray, worship, or pay respects to in Mandarin. When she died, I was really wanting to learn about Chinese ancestor worship rituals, and I started experimenting with my own methods of doing them. Usually you buy these papers from the store, like paper money and effigies, but I started, and paper gifts that they like. So I thought, oh, why not you just draw your own gifts and burn those things. So I was doing that. And then at the art museum, I started experimenting with these installations. This is paper money, and we actually had a medium come in to advise on the installation because of the spiritual nature of it. And these plant sculptures, these are her jasmine bonsais that she took care of for 40 years. I brought them into the museum and put the plant lights on them. That's her oxygen mask from the NICU. And this was a ritual performance that I did with also other paper effigies. And I started thinking about how can we instruct people on how to worship their ancestors. because I come from a generation of people who usually, if we even practice it at all, would just follow their parents or grandparents. My grandma would say, throw the paper in the bin and burn it. So I just threw it with her, but without really understanding why or what was happening with it. I also did a survey, part of the exhibition and a workshop. And then I was going around interviewing people in the religious and funeral industries about where my grandma went, because she had a Christian deathbed conversion despite practicing all these things her whole life. So I was very curious, and I interviewed like the monk at the Buddhist temple where her ashes were, and a Chinese religious goods shop and things like that. And ended up writing this experimental essay as a research document for the residency. You can find the link over there. And then all this led to, so after those explorations, it led to me wanting to explore these rituals more deeply and how I can reinvent them as a younger Chinese Singaporean. And I became an artist in residence through this business arts residency at Ban Ka Hiang, which is a historic Chinese religious goods merchant, so Alex is the third generation owner, and those are his parents, and that uncle's father started the business in the 1950s after coming to Singapore from China. So it was an amazing experience, sitting in the shop, learning about all these goods surrounding me and being kind of like an assistant shopkeeper. And it's really special to me because I've sort of become an extended member of the family now. And also the uncle has recently passed away. And the shop has also closed down. So, in learning about all these products and practices, I realized that the first step was to understand the basics. And so I created this kind of mega poster in English and Mandarin about the goods, in collaboration with the family, like asking them how I should arrange it and what each of these things meant. And then in conjunction with that, I had a series of workshops where people, and primarily younger people, came who had never done the rituals without their families before. And we spoke to people, older people who were just sitting around about the rituals, and then they got to go to the shop to pick out what the goods that they wanted for their own custom rituals. And then we went to the back of the shop and conducted burning rituals. And that's Ahok, the shop's worker, employee, who was giving a demonstration of like the best way to arrange the paper before you start lighting it all up. And then that led me to dream visitations. So in the Chinese world, there is a term, 托梦, for dream visitations. That is like the level of importance given to it. I think in many other cultures also, dream visitations are an important thing. So I was on residency at Taipei Artist Village Treasure Hill, and that was where I kicked off the research, and it was a really apt place to do so because Taiwan is a very spirited place. And so that's the link to the repository. And I collected dream visitations about from departed loved ones, about from deities, even from a plant. So it was very interesting and allowed me to create theories around dream visitations and present them in art spaces. So this is Dream Visitation 41. And then there was dream visitation candy. So all these things started happening because I was following the trail of my grief and wanting to be in communion with my grandmother. And it was a really kind of like a magical unfolding that started happening in my life. So Huang Bo-zhi, a Taiwanese artist who had worked with Darwan Kadra Drepan, an indigenous elder in Taiwan, she receives dream visitations from her ancestors on how to make wine with native plants, and she would sell them to her customers. And he collaborated with her for a project, and they had a dream wine salon space. And then when I met him and told him about my research, he was like, "Hey, I have this extra bottle of wine. Would you like to try it?" And I was so amazed. I said, "Wow, of course I would be so honored to try it." And I wanted to connect with my great-grandma because I never met her, and I found out recently through family oral history interviews that she was a plant medicine healer, which seems so unbelievable to me in a very like westernized Singapore. And the first night I received a vision in a dream, which I feel was a dream visitation from her, and she showed me these ingredients: peanut, ginger, garlic, chives. And then I experimented with many versions with different binders, like maltose. And eventually, I made these candies that would be part of different exhibitions and people could eat them. And then the repository was also activated with different experiments, like this portal for the god of the land. Also made a film out of one of the dream visitations, which was about a dream visitation from a banyan tree to a construction worker at the Taipei Artist Village. And this was also with some experiments in plant communication that I was trying. I sometimes organize these dream visitation tea times where people sit around or versions of this where we read the dream visitations over some dream tea. And this performance, which I've done twice now, You and I Are Everything That Is Here For Us to Be Together, a waking dream we make, an interactive performance where the audience members have to perform scores that are related to the dreams in the repository, and it becomes like a half an hour communal performance. And the latest one was just at the closing of Dream Juice at PCC Paragon Arts. And this I've hosted several times now also, Ancestor Dream Circles, pretty deep dives talking about ancestry and dream visitations and making ritual objects to connect with ancestors, followed by a guided meditation to connect with an ancestor. I should also add for context that in 2020, the year my grandma died, I started training to be an Akashic Records practitioner. So that is one of the things I do, and I give readings on the side. And so my spiritual practice has become more and more entwined with my artistic practice. So some of that exploration on Chinese religious goods has ended up, in these forms as exhibitions. I was making these mobiles, thinking about how we can connect in ways that feel, to me, more creative and not perpetuating capitalism in the afterlife. Like, instead of burning millions of dollars for your ancestors, what about making a really special mobile for them? And something we explored in workshops, also at the exhibition. Also, some of these themes around ancestry have been translated into performance. So I really like to create a constellation around the themes that I'm interested in and let them be expressed in many different ways. And then recently, I also looked at dialects. So, from the grief, ancestor worship, ancestry, dialects. So Singapore has a large population of Chinese people who came from China. I mean, I'm third generation now, and we all grew up speaking English. We learn Mandarin in school, and then some older people speak dialects, but many young people don't speak dialects anymore. So my dialect is Hokkien from southern China. And so when I was doing a residency at the Goethe Institute Singapore with my collaborator, Su Hui, we did this project, Ancestral Tongues, investigating dialects and their relationship to ancestral migration and how it lives on or does not really live on in our embodied beings of younger people in Singapore, and what repairing that relationship might look like. So through our research, we came up with a series of scores, and we worked with a citizen choir that we invited into the project, and it became this performance night where we performed the scores with the citizen choir and with members of the public, or the citizen choir at times conducted members of the public to make sounds in dialect, or we had porridge, we played with rice, different things. I was sewing with my late grandma's sewing machine, and this was the final score, which was about sending blessings to our ancestors in their sea crossings across space-time with dialect performance. And this is the last project I'll share. How can an intimate spiritual process of remembrance and transformational grief, drawing from expanded spirituality, inform and translate into an artwork that is a utilitarian portal for connection? So when my grandma died, I rubbed some of her belongings on bread to grow mold, to prolong her existence, so to speak. And then I couldn't keep the mold, or my father would have killed me. So I took pictures of the mold, and then I printed them on these cotton handkerchiefs. And they're called grandma mold hankies. And it was part of a larger installation. Oh, also, I want to share this quote from this book called Our Grateful Dead, which I really recommend. It's about grief, and it's about our dynamic and transformative relationships with the departed, and how grief is not just about these stages that you move through and then you move on in life. And there's a quote in there that goes, "I always carry one of my father's handkerchiefs. Should I be sad, he's the one to comfort me." And I came upon this quote halfway through the process of making these handkerchiefs, and really resonated with me. And the circle and the dot, why the circle and the dot? I'll read an excerpt from that essay that I had explained earlier. 一个圆圈里面一个点, a circle with a dot inside. In the past, this was how illiterate people signed paper offerings burnt for loved ones. Some descendants would want to be rewarded and blessed. I just want you to know it's me. From heart through to hand, the circle and dot contain my essence. A 3D mark to an unknown realm, an interdimensional transmission. Like, this is me, can you tell? Like, sealed with a kiss. Like, from here to there. Like, I love and miss you. This was part of an installation called the Dream Visitation Temple. And then the body of work I showed there was called Required by Sorrow. So the Dream Visitation Temple is this divinatory proposal where the dream, the oniric and waking worlds meet. People can enter into repose and reception in this space and try to receive dream visitations. The video at the back, I wish I had a better picture of it, but it's a 1-hour video of the Chinese religious goods shop in its final days. So all these things entered the space together, and this exhibition was about grief, so it felt like it was in really good company. And then these were some of the detailed shots. 49 bowls around the circle because of Chinese practices of 49th, you have to go pray to your ancestors on the 49th day after the death. And it's believed that on the 49th day is when they would reincarnate. And then I did a performance lecture in the space, and we all held the hankies and went out to look at the full moon. So yeah, thank you. That was a lot.
Thank you so much, Salty. We have time for some questions, and we have a live stream going tonight, so I'll bring you the mic for your question, and that way our live audience can hear you over YouTube.
Thank you for that talk. That was really excellent. I'm extremely interested in the Dream Visitations project, and I was wondering how many of those you've received, and also curious if you've seen any patterns from looking at them all that were unexpected.
I received 50 something and then I stopped collecting them. I would like to start another round of collection. It just is a lot of work. Yeah, there are definitely patterns that people talk about. Unexpected patterns, or at least something that I wasn't expecting when I started the research. Like I said, going to Taiwan was really apt, and I got a lot of intel there. So one of the first things people told me, which I wasn't expecting, was that you can receive dream visitations from deities as well as murdered individuals. So over there, it's kind of common knowledge that, like, if there is a forensic case and they're trying to crack the case, the murdered individual might visit the dreams of the forensic doctor to give a clue as to how to crack the case. Yeah. And some of those dreams are in the repository as well. And people have all sorts of theories, like you get the dream kind of around the 5 or 6 a.m. time when you're kind of about to wake up, and then you can remember the dream better. Or like the Chinese religious goods shop auntie and uncle would say that, and this is, I think it's absolutely true because I've seen it in so many dreams that I've collected and people told me about, like closer to death anniversaries, the departed would appear in the dream as a like, hey, it's a reminder, my death anniversary is coming up, please burn me something, please go to the shop and buy something and do a ritual. There have also been repeated stories of like descendants, like adult children whose elderly parents used to go to the shop but they never did, and then they get a dream telling them to go to the shop and they don't even know the name of the shop before that. And then they go to the shop and they report it to the shopkeeper. Wow. Yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. My paternal grandma passed in 2020 as well, my Oma, so I appreciate all that you were talking about with that and that sort of exploration of aging and grief. I think I'm curious, dealing with such a heavy subject, you also have this like lightness or this humor that comes through. And I wondered if you had any advice to how to make some of those things a little bit, I don't know, less weighty.
I think I naturally took to it in a lighter way because maybe my grandma just feels so close to me. I was just reflecting this morning as I was preparing for the lecture that it sometimes doesn't even feel like she is gone from my life physically, because it just feels like she's around me all the time, and the path has unfolded because I've believed in it and taken me to all these places. And connected me with lots of people who are grieving and telling me that they connect with the work. So that's been very meaningful as well.
Thank you, Salty. That was incredible to hear sort of the breadth of your work. And it strikes me how prolific you are. Like, there's just so much work. And I'm curious, it's kind of a nuts and bolts, salt and pepper kind of question, but I'm like, how do you kind of, what's your method for kind of tracking all these different threads in your life? Like, and do you go from sort of one line of inquiry into another, or do you compartmentalize? Yeah, I'm curious if you can speak to that.
I think maybe it looks like a lot, but this has been like 6 years, maybe, and not, a lot of them don't really overlap. I'm not sure if some of them overlap, some of them don't. often I'm juggling different things at a time, and it just takes a lot of trust and patience, especially with the precarity of being a freelance artist with financial worry. But I feel a lot of belief in the work, and so like I'll make it regardless. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question about compartmentalizing. Yeah. I think the work on grief just kind of goes on and on and on. And I'm just allowing it to unfold in its own time, because I've looked back and seen the magic of what it has brought to my life. And being guided by that is like a kind of channeling. And it helps me to be less doubtful about like how it will be received by art audiences. Like it doesn't matter as much because I'm guided by something else. Yeah. Oh, hi.
Hi. It's been a while.
Yeah.
But I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you, and this might be personal, but you spoke to grief not so much being as something you experience in stages, but something else. And I'm curious to hear more about that.
I think I was referencing that book, Our Grateful Dead, where they talked about how models of grief as having stages and then you like move on after that as being toxic and problematic. But to understand that we are in this dynamic relationship with our departed and how these relationships can transform us if we allow them to. So for me, because I keep repeating this, but because I've followed it with a lot of trust, it has allowed me to transform myself and my relationship with my grandmother in ways that I could not have imagined. And I was recently very much guided to trace my ancestral village in China, and no one else in my family was really doing that, and I re-established contact, and I forced my father to go visit my ancestral village with me, and it was a really life-changing experience, and now I'm hoping to make a video about that. And on hindsight, it's like, wow, I was guided by my ancestors to make that trip the whole time. So just one thing after another is unfolding and unfolding and unfolding. Thank you.
So in the beginning, thank you very much for,
Yeah.
by the way, for coming in and talking to us. This has been wonderful. In the beginning, you referred to yourself as a trickster.
Yes.
And I was curious about that.
Yeah, I feel that it comes naturally to me, and I feel it's important to provoke the hegemonic spaces that we live in. And because my lineage is from the MFA in Art and Social Practice, I think that carries a lot of trickster energy, or it can, if you choose to let it. And yeah, I'm really interested in provoking those spaces, and I think we have to, like, museums need to be reformed. The art industry or the art market need to be reformed, and we can do it with a sense of playfulness and seriousness at the same time. Yeah.
So I was wondering if I should hold this question in, but I can't, so I'm going to ask.
Oh, yeah,
So
please.
my actual thesis has dream visitations in it as well.
Wow.
And I wanted to know, and this is kind of a really weird question, but I wanted to know with the period of time where the person has passed away, it was 49 days in China, and then they reincarnate. what is supposedly supposed to happen to their spirit after that? Does it go into their new body, or do they split off so you can still talk to them? I know it's weird.
I don't know if I can answer that question with confidence. This is in the Taoist, or what it has evolved to today in terms of ancestor and deity worship in Singapore, in that kind of frame. So they believe in this thing where like there's 3 souls and 7 sub-souls, and the 3 souls are the yang and the 7 sub-souls are the yin, or something like that. And then after all the prayers that your descendants do for you, it installs the departed as an ancestor. Like, it makes you an ancestor because they are burning all these things and helping to release your karma, something like that. And then on the 49th day, potentially that person is reincarnated, but I personally think that the soul can split up and go to many places. Like, I personally believe that my grandma left a piece of her soul with me. And so, yeah, it's very subjective. But I'm curious about your thesis.
I really enjoyed your talk, Salty, and
Thank you.
I like the scope of your work, the breadth of it, and how it's interpersonal and also socio-culturally relevant. I was curious about some of the concepts that you brought up toward the end of your talk, especially concerning spirituality and art. And I know that spirituality is something that is personal, and it's objective and subjective simultaneously. I was curious if you find yourself putting your work into conversation with some of the texts that address that, such as like Vasily Kandinsky's Concerning the Spiritual and Art, or Roger Lipsy's follow-up text on it, An Art of Our Own, Spiritual in the 21st Century of Art, or Carl Jung's Man and His Symbols, or if your relationship with spirituality and art, especially in a Southeastern and Eastern lens, perhaps if it's something more personal, like how you go about exploring that further in a contemporary era.
Yeah, it's currently more of the latter, but I am interested in encountering those texts and seeing how this could enter into like critical discourse spaces with a sense of tricksterness, maybe, or even some kind of innocence. So earlier on, I had class discussion with the low-res MFA students, and Ryan mentioned that it felt like a relief to talk about these things that are more like intuitive in a space that is typically very like critical discourse kind of space, very talking about theory and things like that. But I think, like for me, it's important not to forget that art is a kind of channeling, and there's a lot of intuition involved, and I would like to honor that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there one more question? Oh, there's a lot more. Okay. We'll take 2.
Hi, I just want to say thank you so much for your talk. I don't come from art, but I'm an anthropology student at Reed. But it was really interesting to hear you just talk about family relations, and I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more towards like family reactions to your art. I think especially my dad is Malaysian Chinese, my mom is Indonesian Chinese, so that kind of culture is a little bit different from what we experience in America. And I like something that I've run into as I've tried to trace like family genealogy and things like that is like resistance to find out those stories, and like willingness to answer questions. And I just wondered how you navigate that search.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for that question. I invite my parents selectively to the projects I think that they will like. I don't tell them about the phallic performance or the paintings, but I invite them to the projects with the older ladies because they'll think I'm a very nice person. And then they feel really proud of me. So being selective. But then to your second part about tracing ancestry, I think there is great potential in the not knowing as well. Any journey to trace ancestry and lineage will be filled with grief and loss, but to me, that is an opportunity for your imagination, for your dialogue with your ancestors, or what you think that is to you, and opportunity for magic realism and speculative fiction. And that's something I'm excited to explore in my next project, which is a video about my ancestral village and ancestral migration of my family. Thanks.
Thank you.
There was one more question over here, and then we'll conclude.
Thanks so much, Salty. I think you've spoken to this a little bit, but like today in hearing about your work, I was like, I loved seeing your erotic paintings alongside like all of these other, and the many different like media that you work in. And I just think I was struck by the kind of like courage of that, like working in a bunch of different forms. And knowing that you have like a sense of craft and discipline and also like a willingness to work in new ways, and I wondered, I know you also like teach and you're a visiting artist here, like how you talk to young artists about that, like kind of trying out new forms or deciding what's good enough to share, or I don't know, like kind of how you think about that or talk to people about that.
That's a hard one to answer. I feel like if you believe in art, then you just do it. I don't know if that's a too overly simplistic answer, but if, like when I teach a class of undergrads, I think the main purpose is for them to learn about themselves as artists and people, first and foremost, and not like your art is good or your art is bad. It's about how do you want to explore the world and what are you curious about, what is meaningful to you as a person. And I try not to shy away from that. Those paintings, like I said, I'm not trained in painting, and I only made them last summer, but I'm very happy to just share them with everyone. Because I think it's interesting and fun. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for coming out tonight. One more hand for Salty.
Thank you so much for coming.